hot.
In a little short while, all this week here at Citizen Royal Media Services, Citizen Television Hot 96, we're celebrating 10 years since we promulgated the Constitution. We're calling it KATIBA at 10. And we'll be speaking to none other than the champion of fighting for human rights, Irungu Houghton himself. I mean, I've known this man for more than 40 years. I even know his Christian name, which I won't say on air. He might take offense, but I knew him when he had a Christian name. That's how far back we go. Irungu Houghton is the executive director of Amnesty International Kenya. He'll be joining us in a little short while. In the meantime, you heard a short while ago, this coming Saturday, August the 29th, is the biggest concert ever in Kenyan history, and we want you to be a part of making history, folks. Kenya Yetu Live is what we're calling it. And I'm telling you, folks, this one is a big one. It's virtual. It starts at 8 p.m. And it's going to feature the likes of Sauti Soul, Eric Wainaina, Susanna Owio, Heart the Band, Sir Elvis, my goodness, Elizabeth Njoroge, Nairobi Strings Quartet, Sami Do, Red Fourth Chorus, and so many more, folks. It's called Kenya ni Yetu, and you should go to yetulive.com. Do that this coming Saturday. Yetu Live on Citizen TV. It's going to be all live. Sponsored by Standard Bank, supported by the Media Owners Association and Hot 96. I'm telling you, folks, this one is one for the record books. Do not miss out. This coming Saturday, August the 29th, Kenya ni Yetu Live. Already 1 million people have booked their seats. 1 million. Let's spread the word. At the same time, there is a lotto in town, a new one, folks. Not just any kind of lotto. Lotto Chonjo is all about changing lives. That's why it's called Lotto Chonjo, because we are Chonjo. We care about our brothers and sisters. We are our brothers and our sisters' keepers. So Lotto Chonjo says, you know what? Yes, you can win some cash. You can feel happy about it. But what if you give back? That's what it's all about, folks. Lotto Chonjo. Everything from water harvesting solutions, things we don't think about on a daily basis, but when it gets dry and it's the dry season, especially in arid and semi-arid areas, well, it's hard to get water. People walk kilometers to get water, and that's tough for them. So what does Lotto Chonjo do? Well, solutions. Everything from buying water tanks to piping solutions. That's what they do, folks, to make folks out there feel that they are part of this country. When it comes to education, Lotto Chonjo leading from the front. Everything from book drives to giving out bursaries to 47 young men and women in 47 counties. Folks, can you imagine? You can take claim, you can take credit for educating the next generation. That's what Lotto Chonjo does. You could be a part of that. When it comes to healthcare, folks, in these times of COVID, well, Lotto Chonjo is up there with the best of the best. Yes, indeed. Medical camps, especially in marginalized areas. And Lotto Chonjo wants to take this a notch higher by making it an annual event. And then, of course, there's planting trees. Remember, at Independence, Irungu and I will know this, at Independence, our forest cover was more than 10%. It drastically reduced over the decades, but now Vision 2030 says, you know what? We've got to get it back up to 10%. Lotto Chonjo is up there, leading from the front, planting trees. The late, great Professor Wangari Maathai said the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. But she went on to say, the next best time to plant a tree is today. You can be a part of it, folks, with Lotto Chonjo all the way. The win-win team being your brothers and your sisters' keeper. For more information, go to www.lottochonjo.com. Again, www.lottochonjo.com. It is exactly 19 minutes past the hour, 7 o'clock. All this week we are celebrating KATIBA at 10. 10 years since we promulgated the Constitution. 10 years later, there's already talk of a referendum. What's that about? And also human rights. Well, who better to talk about human rights and the Constitution than the Executive Director of Amnesty International Kenya, my man, Irungu Houghton, who joins us live on the line right now. Irungu, good to talk to you. It's Jeff and Hamo on Hot.
Good morning, Hamo. Good morning, Jeff. And it's a great week I think we've got ahead of us. Time to reflect and also really dedicate ourselves to the constitutional vision that we agreed to 10 years ago.
Absolutely. Tell me something, Irungu. On the 27th of August 2010, where were you?
I was actually, funny enough, I was actually in the country. I was in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. I was working with Oxfam. I was pushing for the implementation of African Union standards, including the protocol on the rights of women in Africa. I was out of the country.
So you missed all the hula baloo and the color and pomp and circumstance.
Yeah, unfortunately, I couldn't join by Zoom as we could have been.
It wasn't an option then.
Yeah. So tell me something. 10 years later, have we made strides? Are we teething problems? Are we? I mean, tell us. How would you sum it up?
Yeah, I was looking at it the other day, and one of the things that struck me was actually, since the U.S. Constitution was passed in 1798, you know that most constitutions don't make it their 18th birthday.
Wow.
And actually, for Africa, the life expectancy is actually 10 years and 2 months exactly. So this constitution is, it's almost halfway through its life expectancy. But I think what we have to say is that the constitution has been a transformative document. It has really created a new vision for the country, what we now call the Second Republic. But for many of us, in fact, actually, I usually say that there are three types of Kenyans. There are Kenyans who think the constitution is a calendar. It happened in 2010, and the next year there was another calendar. There are some who think it's a comic, and therefore don't pay any attention to it at all. But there are some, like myself, who think that it's a contract, who actually believe that it fundamentally shifted the nature of government and also the nature of our expectations in terms of our rights and freedoms.
Absolutely. Well put. Three types of Kenyans.
Oh, yeah.
There are some who say, you know what, is it too early for a referendum 10 years into the Constitution? Is it too early? Because there is talk, obviously. There is talk of a referendum this year or next year. What are your thoughts, Irungu?
So many of us, I think, who voted for the Constitution know that it wasn't a perfect document. We do know that we saw the limitations. We saw the bloated wage bill. We saw the fact that there were too many counties. There was hardly any protection really for women in terms of reproductive and health. We could see that the president and the deputy president would run into problems because there was no divorce clause, and not just for the president, the deputy president, but even governors and their deputies. But I think we have to recognize that it was an extremely powerful document, and I think that the key chapters that are really important is the chapter 1, the first one that talks about a people-driven state. Chapter 4, which talks about the Bill of Rights, and that is probably the longest Bill of Rights and the most expansive Bill of Rights in the world, I'm told by the experts, like Professor Yashpal Gai. Or the section, chapter 6, that talks about corruption and impunity. These were critical chapters, and they're world-class chapters. So in some ways, what we would argue is that these chapters do not require any changes. It is too soon to amend these three particular chapters. And the problem we've got is with the chapter 11, which is where most people are thinking in terms of the cost of devolution, there is simply not enough agreement and consensus in the political class and in the country to, for example, reduce the number of counties. And we saw this last week. We saw this when only 67 senators could not agree on the county revenue formula. They've had 10 attempts to do this. And in fact, on the 9th attempt, we even saw 3 senators arrested by the Director of Criminal Investigations officers in order to try and swing the vote in one direction, would be my sense. And if 67 senators cannot agree on one issue, like the revenue formula for the counties, then how will 47.5 million Kenyans create consensus without conflict? We are not in a constitutional moment.
Absolutely. You mentioned chapter 6, Irungu. When are we ever going to adhere to that? But, it's about integrity. It's about ethics. And, we seem to skip that when we elect some of our leaders.
Yeah, you probably remember the last time, I think one of the last times I was on the show, we talked about the red card campaign just before the election. We tried, a number of organizations, including Transparency International and others, we tried to stop the election. We tried to stop candidates from being given the right to be able to run, particularly where they had a track record of corruption and mismanagement of public resources. But unfortunately, tragically, a number of the agencies, including the Electoral Commission, allowed them to run. And what we have now, out of the 20 that we red carded, I think about 6 of them have run into problems with corruption post their election. So I think the key thing there really is Chapter 6 was mutilated not at the level of the Constitution, but at the level of the laws that were passed in Parliament. And that's one of the other problems we've had, is that it's not so much the Constitution that is the problem, but it is the implementation of the Constitution, particularly in the Parliament passing unconstitutional laws, that has had that problem. We saw that with the Chapter 6, or the leadership integrity laws. We saw it with the security laws, and we saw it more recently with the tax laws last year.
You know, someone once said, you get what you deserve.
No, I think Kenyans on the whole don't deserve this level of maladjustment. I think what has happened is that the elite, those that are in government, remain maladjusted, to use a phrase by Martin Luther King, maladjusted to the new context of the Constitution. And it is not unintentional, it is deliberate. It is to ensure that power continues to be centralized and controlled by a small number of people for private benefit, rather than serving the millions of Kenyans that require this.
Yeah, it looks like Kenya is heading more and more towards a one-party state, Irungu, and you guys at Amnesty International have your hands full. You are, you have to be out there literally on the front lines with all the various allegations of human rights abuses.
Yeah, I think human rights is an everyday, every person responsibility. As within Amnesty International, we have opened up and are now consciously and creatively reaching out to Kenyans to become members. We've quadrupled our membership over this COVID-19 period. So, we started off with 200 members over the last year or so, and particularly over the last 5 months. We've now gone up to 1,000 members. We have 17,000 supporters. So really what I'm seeing also in a moment of crisis is Kenyans reaching for leadership, reaching for ways in which that they can contribute and support. And, in some ways, my inbox and the inbox of my team are really full with people saying, how can we help? How can we support? And that's been the history of the Constitution. If we think about it, how did this Constitution come into being? If the people that hadn't been displaced during the post-election violence, we wouldn't have this Constitution. If Wangari Maathai hadn't stood up to protect Uhuru Park and Karura, we wouldn't have this Constitution. If John Muye had not kneeled down to pray in front of 100 police officers with tear gas, we wouldn't have this Constitution. If Joya hadn't been beaten outside of Parliament, we wouldn't have this Constitution. I could continue like this, but the reality is that this Constitution comes on the back and with the blood of thousands of Kenyans, and therefore we must protect it, we must deepen it, and we must make sure that it's not mutilated on its 10th birthday.
You sound hopeful, Irungu. You sound like there's still room for hope.
Yeah, hope is a choice. It's never a feeling. Huh? That's where the real power comes from. So, my head can tell me that we're facing in the wrong direction. We're driving backwards. Yeah. But my heart can say that actually this car, in the way that it's driving in the wrong direction, can be reversed, can turn around, and can move in the right direction. But we have to create the political will, and the political will is really a consequence of public will.
And what do you tell those people out there who say, you know what, if we're going into a referendum, it's all about greed and creating positions for certain individuals. Expanding the executive will only create a top-heavy kind of leadership.
Yeah, I think we have to see the proposals from BBI to understand what is happening. There seems to be two things that are being looked at. The one is the one you've already mentioned the first one, which is expanding the table of spaces for people to essentially come through the elections and be awarded with different positions. I think there is a problem with the idea that the next most popular presidential candidate after the election is not the leader of the opposition in Parliament. I think there is a real problem there. We've seen it in Uganda, we're seeing it in Kenya, and that needs to be taken care of. But I think we also need to make sure that we do not see a weakening of the Bill of Rights, we do not see a weakening of Chapter 6, and these are the two that corrupt representatives and corrupt state officers have been trying to destroy, because it will prevent them from doing the kind of things that we've seen during COVID-19. It is crazy that we are developing more what was the other phrase that I heard recently? Pandemic profiteers. We are creating more English words around corruption than we are around integrity, and that needs to be stopped in this moment. So I think as the BBI proposals are brought to us as citizens, we have to look at them carefully to see whether they are going to do more harm or whether they are going to improve on essentially what is a fairly, if not very progressive document.
I'm glad you mentioned that word corruption, Irungu, because for me, and for me especially, the greatest human rights violation is individuals taking advantage of a pandemic like this and profiting from it. There's no greater human rights violation.
Yeah, I mean, we have it by no better authority than the executive director of the World Health Organization this week, that stealing public monies designed for public health protection is actually almost a crime against humanity.
And it's sad because people are skirting around it. They're now dancing around it, laying blame, pointing fingers, and your fingers are right in the cookie jar.
Absolutely. I mean, last week on Friday, tens of people were arrested demonstrating against corruption. And the question that many of us ask is how is it that the police service is quick to arrest people who are demonstrating against corruption, but have not yet arrested some of the directors who received benefits from doing deals with KEMSA last month or in the last 3 months. Surely that's the first place for our law enforcement agencies to start. Let me give you one other example. In the last 10 days, 7 human beings have been arrested by the Directorate of Civil Investigations. 3 of them have been arrested for speaking and designing websites and writing about corruption, and 3 of them have been arrested for essentially having a different view from the majority view within Senate. These 3 senators were arrested overnight. All 7 of them were arrested at night, if not close to curfew, and they have now been released, except in the case of 2 of them, Gideon Were and Milton, that they have been arrested, who have been re-arrested actually 2 nights ago. All of them have been released, with the exception of these 2, without charges. And what I think my concern is that when we voted for this constitution, we said that we do not want our police service to be weaponized by politicians or by corrupt individuals. We wanted them to be professional and independent. And what's happening is that as we move towards the elections, we are seeing our police service being used essentially to settle scores or to remove critical citizens who are concerned about corruption. And I think that's the real concern as we move into this period, that we must not see laws being tampered with to make that easier for the corrupt.
Absolutely. Irungu, I mean, I'm sure you ask yourself this question once in a while. Where did we go wrong?
This would be if Chidwa Achebe, well, the answer that Chidwa Achebe was there, he would say, when did the rain start beating us? No, I think the price of freedom is constant and eternal vigilance, and that's the reality. And we wash every morning, and I hope the 2 of you washed as you came into the studio before you came to the studio this morning. Not that you came into the studio, but you took a bath this morning.
Yes, hopefully.
Hopefully. Now, if you didn't, the reality is that if you don't take a bath tomorrow, then taking a bath today is pointless. And this is the same thing with human rights protection, which is that you have to continually take a bath, because it doesn't matter in 2 or 3 days whether you took a bath 3 days ago. So eternal vigilance and action is critical to protecting human rights and to advance our society. We can swing back in a moment. And that's why it's so critical, as we do in Amnesty, which is to focus on that generation between the ages of 15 and 35, because that is the generation that will hold the gains of this constitution for the next 2 decades or more. And
what is your advice? Because look, those young people you talk about, a lot of them take freedom for granted.
Yeah, and it is the case historically. I mean, the children of the civil rights movement in the United States of America, dropped the ball. The Mandela generation, as they call them, the Mandela babies, they dropped the ball. And it is the case here also that many of the people under the age of 38, 35 don't remember what the state of the 1970s and 80s looked like. I don't either, contrary to Jeff's opinion of my age. But let me just say that Jeff probably is aware of the time when, there was something called the special branch that used to stand on every corner. They were operators that were paid to listen to all our phone calls. It didn't matter if you had a lawyer, because the police would take instructions from the cabinet or from State House, and it didn't matter if you if you were able to pursue your case in court, because the judge, before passing judgment, would get a phone call from the State House or the cabinet. And the reality is that context has shifted so dramatically for all of us now, because in many ways, even the case of these 7 men who have had their rights violated with arbitrary arrest, the reality is that they can be arrested by police officers, but it is prosecutors that will have to decide whether they will be prosecuted, and that's an independent institution. And if prosecutors decide that they will be prosecuted, they still have the right to a lawyer and the right to a fair trial. And even if that is objected to or obstructed, it is a judge, an independent judge, appointed by the Judicial Service Commission and not by the executive, that will determine whether they are innocent or guilty. So the world has fundamentally changed in Kenya, at least in terms of the laws. What we have to do now is find a country for our constitution.
Yeah, people forget very quickly, Irungu, and I know you noticed that yesterday, August the 24th, was 20 years since the murder of Father Kaiser. And I was asking Hamo, I was telling Hamo that this morning, and he said, Father who? So, people forget very easily about the crimes of the past. And then at the same time, so many people get away with so much crime. And today's paper, Julie Ward, apparently there's new evidence. That was back in 88.
Yeah, it is crazy. It is crazy. I mean, it's often said that the Ark of Justice takes a long time to bring in, and it is true in some cases. But again, what brings that arc much more sharper to a point. And actually, the original phrase by Martin Luther King was that, that it wasn't that the Ark of Justice would loop by itself. It was that it was the role of citizens, as per and we have it built into our constitution. It is the role of citizens to make sure that loop of that arc of justice it loops faster. And I think the key thing is that where an injustice takes place and good people are silent, then you will not see justice happen until good people stand up and demand that things change. And for Father Kaiser, we still don't know who killed him. Yeah. For Julie Ward, we still don't know who killed her. For the men and women and the children of the Church of Kiambaa, we still do not have people before a court of law to take responsibility for that. Nor do we have justice for the hundreds of people who were sexually abused and beaten and assaulted during the 2017 election. So, there is much work we need to do in this country, but I think the way that we do this is essentially to raise an army or a movement of 47.5 million human rights defenders that are able to protect their families, their neighbors, their communities, and ultimately this nation. Yeah,
bottom line, evil prospers when good men do nothing.
Excellent, yes.
Irungu, moving forward, okay, the KATIBA, and we've been a part of it for the last 10 years. They say the preamble is what sums it all up. Your thoughts?
Yeah, my favorite parts of the Constitution are the preamble, and I think the reason why it's so powerful is it just speaks to me very directly as a human being, as a patriot to this country, and it says, we the people of Kenya, acknowledging the supremacy of the Almighty God, honoring those who historically struggled to bring freedom and justice to their land, proud, respectful, committed, recognizing, exercising, and then the last part, adopt, enact, and give this Constitution to ourselves and to other future generations. It is really a prayer. It's a prayer to action. And if people don't read the Constitution regularly, I really encourage them to do that. But as I said, for some of us, we see it really as a document that makes no difference in our lives, and therefore we are not protected by it, and we are not inspired by it.
Absolutely. By the way, Irungu, there's a gentleman named Jeremiah Karaoke. He says he remembers you back in 2010 at Oxfam, and he says you're a really cool guy.
That's good to hear. I was about to apologize.
Umeshinda imetokea leo.
All right, Irungu, you get the last word. Your thoughts and hopes going forward.
I think the critical conversation around BBI also is the election. In 2 years, we will turn to the second set of elections under this constitution. We know how the 2017 one went. We know that the constitution essentially argues for power to be distributed either between national governments and the county governments, but also in terms of the management of elections, that it is not the responsibility of party agents to manage an election. It is the responsibility really of an independent electoral commission that manages the elections not on behalf of the parties, but on behalf of us, the voters. And we know that the constitution gave a separation of powers between our parliament, the executive and the judiciary. It is this separation of powers that we must also protect at this period, because if we allow for one center of power, whether it be the executive or whether it be the parliament, to threaten us, we are actually undermining the constitution, and we may be undermining the very stability of this country. So I ask Kenyans to look at the proposals that come from BBI with an open mind, to look at them with a cautious mind, which essentially makes sure that we should not harm the constitution for the interest of a very few against the interest of the majority. And thank you very much once again for coming on this show, Hamo and Jeff.
Amen, amen, and amen. One last question real quick, Irungu. Do you still use your Christian name on your passport?
No, I don't actually, but I do use it in M-Pesa. So anyone who sends me money at this point will probably get that name.
Hamo and I are about to send you some M-Pesa so that we can officially. Good to talk to you, my friend. You have a great day, and God bless you.
You bet.
And you, absolutely. Oh my goodness, this is no doubt what we call